1941 the world was burning. Across Europe, Hitler's armies rolled through city after city, steel against steel, fire against freedom. In the Pacific, Japan's empire tightened its grip, inch by inch, island by island. And on the other side of the ocean, the United States, still at peace, still unprepared. The American Navy, vast but vulnerable, faced a staggering truth: if war came, it would not have enough ships. Not enough hulls to move men or weapons. Not enough time to build them. And yet, in a quiet corner of California, at a shipyard called Mare Island, a single man was about to change everything. Not a commander, not an engineer. Not a general of industry. A welder, making $11 a day. His name was Ted Nelson. And though few would ever know it, the tool he built with his own hands would save over 50 million man-hours, and help forge the greatest shipbuilding miracle in history. Ted Nelson was not born into privilege. He had no degree, no design lab, no patent office behind him. What he had were hands, steady, scarred, and certain. Hands that could melt steel and bend it to will. Each morning, he walked through the gates of the Mare Island Naval Shipyard, the air thick with salt and smoke. The clang of steel plates. The roar of rivet guns. The sparks that rained down like orange snow. America was not yet at war, but the Navy was already preparing. Destroyers, submarines, and carriers filled the docks, their skeletons rising from the scaffolds in a blur of light and sweat. Thousands of men worked shoulder to shoulder, building the backbone of a fleet that would one day sail into hell. But beneath the noise and motion, Nelson saw something else. A problem, invisible to most, but obvious to him. For every joint, every bracket, every stiffener welded into place, workers spend more time climbing than welding. Hours lost on scaffolding, adjusting cables, maneuvering clamps, balancing tools. Every job, a ballet of inefficiency. He began to wonder, what if a man could weld a fastener directly, with no scaffolding, no clamps, no wasted motion? What if steel could fuse to steel, instantly, perfectly, with one pull of a trigger? The idea seemed impossible. But to Nelson, it was simple: a stud, a spark, and a weld. In the dim light of his workshop, Nelson began to experiment. He scavenged old parts from the yard: wires, flux caps, ceramic rings, copper leads. He worked late into the night, long after the shipyard's whistles fell silent. What he envisioned was a handheld tool, a compact welding gun that could join a metal stud to a steel surface in less than a second. No scaffolding, no clamps, no wasted hours. The process relied on a small ceramic cap, a flux that shielded the molten metal as it fused. A simple spring mechanism, a surge of current, and the bond was made, clean, strong, and immediate. To the trained engineers, it sounded insane. A welder's fantasy. They called it dangerous, impractical, even mad. When Nelson brought his prototype to his supervisors at Mare Island, they laughed. They dismissed his device as a toy, a waste of time and materials. They told him to get back to work, to leave the engineering to the engineers. But Nelson refused to let it go. He believed in what he'd built. And so, when the Navy shut the door, he walked away. He quit his job, he sold what little he had. And with borrowed money, $95,000, he began again, in his garage. It was a reckless gamble. But Nelson was not chasing wealth. He was chasing something far greater, a better way to build. In that small garage behind his home, the air was thick with dust and the smell of oil-soaked rags. Nelson's tools were crude, a few vices, a rewound transformer, an old lathe, and a box of ceramic flux caps he'd made by hand. He worked in silence, testing, adjusting, recording. Each failed weld left another scar across the bench. Each spark that burned through his gloves marked another step forward. He studied heat curves, contact times, and current surges. He tried different ceramic shapes to trap molten steel, each designed to hold the heat just long enough for fusion before the flux shattered away. Some melted too fast. Others cracked under pressure. Weeks became months. Then, one night, the current hummed differently. The gun sparked, hissed, and fell silent. Nelson picked up the metal plate, and the stud held firm. It was the first perfect weld. No bolts, no clamps, no wasted motion. A single gun, a single touch, and steel had bonded to steel. He set the gun down and stared for a long time. He had done it, alone, in a garage no bigger than a tool shed. His triumph was short-lived. When Nelson returned to the Navy to demonstrate his gun, he was met with skepticism once more. Supervisors shrugged off his invention, claiming it couldn't withstand the stresses of combat construction. Their dismissal cut deep. He had risked everything, and they laughed again. But Nelson refused to let rejection be the end. He took out personal loans, mortgaged his home, and poured every dollar into a small company he called Nelson's Stud Welding Corporation. He trained a handful of loyal workers, machinists, welders, electricians, and turned his garage dream into a modest factory. By late 1941, the first production guns were ready. Then, on December 7th, everything changed. Pearl Harbor. Overnight, the United States was at war. And suddenly, the same Navy officers who had dismissed Nelson were desperate for faster, stronger methods of ship construction. The first orders came from Mare Island itself, the place that had once turned him away. Soon, Nelson's guns were shipped to every major shipyard on the West Coast. And as America's war machine roared to life, his invention became one of its quiet engines. In that cramped garage, surrounded by coils of wire and piles of scrap steel, the impossible took shape. He perfected the spring-loaded gun. He refined the ceramic flux. And he tested his invention, over and over, until the welds came clean every time. The process was revolutionary. It allowed a worker to attach a metal stud in less than 1 second, perfectly aligned, perfectly fused. No grinding, no bolts, no laborious scaffolding. A single welder could now do in minutes what once took hours. An entire ship could be fitted in a fraction of the time. Ted Nelson had built a machine that would change everything. But no one cared. The Navy had already turned him away. Factories were skeptical. And the world still turned, inching closer to war. Then, everything changed. On December 7, 1941, the skies over Pearl Harbor turned black with smoke. The Pacific Fleet lay in ruins. America was thrust into the war it had feared, and now had to fight. Overnight, every shipyard in the nation roared to life. Orders flooded in: destroyers, transports, cargo ships, landing craft. Tens of thousands of new welders were hired. Every rivet, every plate, every beam had to be laid, faster than ever before. And suddenly, Ted Nelson's mad invention didn't seem so mad after all. When word of Nelson's stud welding process reached the Navy again, the reaction was immediate. The same shipyards that had rejected him now begged for his equipment. Mare Island, Richmond, Bethlehem, and beyond, every yard needed speed, efficiency, and precision. Nelson's company, Nelson's Stud Welding Corporation, began producing his guns around the clock. The device was simple, light enough for one man to hold, powerful enough to weld a steel stud in a heartbeat. The results were staggering. Ships that once took months to build now took weeks. Welders no longer needed to spend hours rigging scaffolds or bolting fittings by hand. Every stud welded in place meant another hour saved, multiplied across thousands of workers, thousands of ships. In total, Nelson's invention would save the U.S. Navy more than 50 million man-hours during World War II. 50 million hours, time that built the ships that carried men across oceans, that landed tanks on distant shores, that turned defeat into victory. The Navy took notice. In 1943, Nelson was awarded the WW2 Citation for Excellence, the highest honor for industrial innovation. He would receive it twice. And as Liberty ships rolled down the ways, 2,710 of them, and submarines slid silently into the water, 203 in all, each bore the unseen mark of Nelson's gun. It was the spark beneath the steel, the hidden heartbeat of America's arsenal. As the war raged, Nelson's factory grew. What had begun in a garage became a cornerstone of wartime production. Stud welding found its way into shipyards, tank plants, aircraft factories, anywhere speed met necessity. To the men and women on the lines, Nelson's gun was more than a tool. It was a lifeline, lighter, faster, safer. In the hands of a skilled welder, it sang, a brief flash, a puff of smoke, a bond unbreakable. And yet, Ted Nelson never sought fame. While others won medals and headlines, he stayed in the background, working, refining, improving. His focus was never on recognition, but on results. The world would know the names of admirals, generals, and presidents, but few would ever hear the name Ted Nelson. And yet, without him, the ships might not have come fast enough. The invasion fleets might not have sailed on time. And victory might have cost far more than lives alone. When peace finally came, Nelson's stud welding process didn't fade, it evolved. The same technology that built warships now built bridges, oil platforms, and skyscrapers. Everywhere steel met steel, his method endured. His company grew into a pillar of post-war industry. Factories across the nation adopted stud welding as the standard for structural construction. Automakers, rail yards, and power plants used his process daily, often without realizing its origin. Nelson continued to refine the gun long after the war, introducing automatic systems and portable rigs. He remained a welder at heart, practical, humble, unassuming. He rarely spoke of the war, or of the rejection that nearly ended his dream. When asked what drove him, he simply said, "There was work to be done." By the time he passed, millions of studs had been welded using his process. Billions more would follow. His spark, first lit in that small California garage, still burned across the world. When the war ended in 1945, the world breathed again. The fires dimmed. The shipyards fell silent. The men who had built the arsenal of democracy laid down their torches and went home. Ted Nelson returned to his workbench, the same quiet, stubborn craftsman he had always been. His company would go on to shape post-war industry, his technology finding new life in construction, bridges, power plants, and skyscrapers. But his greatest legacy was invisible, measured not in medals or fortunes, but in time saved, ships built, and lives changed. Because Ted Nelson proved something eternal, that innovation doesn't always come from the top. That sometimes it comes from a single worker, with an idea, a spark, and the courage to keep going when everyone else says no. In the crucible of war, nations rise and fall. But in the quiet corners of their factories and shipyards, the true miracles are forged. The mad welder's gun, born in rejection, built in a garage, tested in war, became more than a tool. It became a testament to the power of persistence, to the faith of one man who refused to give up, and to the simple, unstoppable truth that even a spark, in the right hands, can change the course of history.